Okay, so in a nutshell, that's it. That's what Cryonics is. I can talk a bunch about what Cryonics is, why we do what we do, but that's not the purpose of this meeting. It's mainly about standby and what we can do to make standby work for Cryonics. What standby is if you remember shortly in the video, they said immediately after death, you want to get a person stabilized. And how do we stabilize them? The paramedics in the room will understand it's just like a cardiac arrest code, but add ice. Now, intuitively, we know that ice slows things down. Like a bowl of potato salad on a picnic table is going to last longer in the refrigerator, right? And there's an equation. I believe it's called the Arrhenius equation, where it's a reverse. The numbers get bigger in reverse exponentially, or reverse exponential, and like seconds of time at room temperature become minutes in a refrigerator, becomes hours in a freezer, becomes months at dry ice temperatures, becomes thousands of years at liquid nitrogen temperatures. So we know as paramedics, if someone dies and it's in the wintertime or in their cold, icy lake, we say they're not dead until they're warm and dead, okay? So we're taking that to the extreme. You're not dead until you're warm and dead, maybe thousands of years from now. And that might sound crazy. That might sound kind of a little bit out there. But if you think about it, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, if you would suggest pounding on someone's chest to bring them back to life, or shocking them with electricity, it sounds a lot like Frankenstein, but that's routinely what we do today. We don't always save people, but we try. We fight the good fight, and we try. And there's a lot of people that poke at us because what we're doing, there's no proof in concept that it works. And well, that's the whole point. We're not in the future yet. This is like a half experiment. The experiment has started now, right? But it won't be finished maybe for another 100 years. So you can't really say what is or is not possible. And the only way to find out what's possible is to reach a little bit into that gray area of the impossible. And that's how, that's how great discoveries are made. And another thing is, right now, what we're doing, we're helping to advance society right now. Not just, let's just say cryonics doesn't work. We're still advancing science by finding out what does or doesn't work. But we're also putting a lot of funding and research money into cryobiology. And cryobiology is the science of freezing eggs, embryos, maybe skin for a fire burn victim or something like that, embryos for in vitro fertilization, sperm, eggs, whatever. They're trying to take that to the next level, to more complex tissues like livers, kidneys, hearts. Now imagine what we could do with people who need a heart transplant if we could expand that window of 3 hours to maybe 3 weeks because of liquid nitrogen temperatures. How many millions of lives would that save now? So our members and our donors are contributing money to that research now, because that indirectly helps us. Because if we can freeze a whole body better, we can probably freeze organs better. So we're trying to get to that point where we're going from tissues to better freezing techniques for organs, to best case freezing techniques for a whole person. And we understand that it's not a perfect process, and that's going to be a big theme of mine. It's not a perfect process. The enemy of a good job is a perfect job, right? It doesn't mean we don't strive for perfection, but we're still going to do a good job. So that being said, why is it important to involve funeral directors? Why is it important to involve paramedics? Well, paramedics, they have experience working with cardiac code arrests. I'm a paramedic from the city of Milwaukee. I was lieutenant there for 15 years. I taught other paramedics. I helped train them, continuing education and so forth. And I was in one of the busiest units. So you get good with practice. If you see a lot of dead people, you see what it takes to bring them back, and you see what doesn't work, what works and what doesn't work. So who better to help teach or help facilitate a standby group than if you can get someone who's got that training Sorry about that. I'll put that down. Funeral directors. Throughout this whole process, you absolutely need, excuse me, I'm going to turn that down. You absolutely need funeral directors to transport a body from point A to point B. That's just the way our legal framework is set up. And we don't funny thing is, we don't have paramedics everywhere. I mean, we've got professional paramedics in the big cities, and then it kind of goes down to paid on call paramedics, down to volunteer paramedics in the boonies or whatever. But funeral directors, people die everywhere. So there's funeral directors all over the world. That network is already there. We need to use funeral directors to move someone from point A to point B. So you got hands, you got eyes, and if you've got willing participants within the funeral director industry, and if we can team up with them, they can help us. And so the important thing is, what are we asking of the funeral directors? We're not asking anything illegal. Everything we're asking is legal, it's moral, right? It's important that, and we're not asking for freebies. You know, we want to fairly compensate you. Doesn't mean we want to be taken advantage of, but fair compensation for the work you do. And you know, I've talked to a lot of funeral directors. I've been in different situations, and even with paramedics or doctors or people in the medical field. You mentioned cryonics, and some people are interested. They want to hear about it. And other people, right away, they get the eye roll. Oh, that's kind of goofy, cryonics, whatever. So you got to kind of break through that, and you got to understand, if you're going to go to your people or your potential customers like that. This is another thing I used to do. When I approached different funeral directors, I got to befriend one of the funeral directors down in the Milwaukee area, and he said, you know, that's what you're doing is really interesting, and you know, we have continuing education courses too, and there's not a lot of new stuff going on in the funeral industry. It's just kind of repetitive, and I bet you a lot of funeral directors in Southeast Wisconsin would like to hear from you. So one of the things I stood up and I talked about with these guys was just how some funeral directors will approach this professionally, and some will right away get the eye rolls or the snickers or whatever. And I attribute it, or I tried to show them how that's like, if you don't have to believe exactly in what we believe. You know, like you could be a Christian funeral home and someone could ask you for an Orthodox Jewish service, for instance. You still can do that respectfully, right? And you don't have to be on the same religion. You don't have to be on the same philosophical, ideological. None of that stuff matters. You know, when you go to call 911 for an ambulance, we don't ask what your religion is. We don't ask what your politics are. We don't ask if you voted for Trump or you didn't. We don't care about that. All we care about is saving lives. And in the funeral industry, the good funeral directors, all they care about is professional, courteous, and compassion to the family who have lost someone. You know, and the bottom line, and we've learned a lot from funeral directors about that too, how to be more compassionate. It's not just a science experiment. So that's why it's so important to get paramedics involved and funeral directors involved in what we do. But why is it important that we're different than, I would never tell a funeral director how to do their job. And just like I don't think the funeral directors would tell the paramedics here how to do their job. But what we're doing is a little bit different than standard funeral and a little bit different than standard paramedic. It's a bit of a mix, and it's got a couple other elements involved. So for the most part, cryonics from a paramedic perspective it's running a cardiac arrest code with ice and a couple other drugs, and extending that code beyond the typical half hour that you would before you give up on a patient. That's about it. From a funeral director standpoint, you know, we've had funeral directors, international and otherwise, they put the patient on a little bit of dry ice, a little bit of ice. They're like, hey, they're fine. The patient will get to us. They're not decaying in any way as far as from the funeral director's standpoint. And they've got them there, and we did a good job. No, there's a certain amount of ice we have to have because damages are, because to us, just because something is like, -1 degree isn't enough when we're going for -90 degrees as far as liquid nitrogen or as far as dry ice goes. So it's a very specific set of rules or like an algorithm that we go down. And it's for the funeral directors, it's basically speed, putting us ahead of other customers, maybe put them on regular ice or put them on the back burner and put us up to the front of the line. And that's what we're willing to compensate for. So it's just about, we're paying, it shouldn't matter here. These people are just looking for a decent funeral, right? We're looking for this little bit extra. And if you want to cooperate with us and, be the best you can professional wise, that's what we ask is speed and quick cool down. And then maybe you could do a little bit of these basic procedures that we're going to talk about. And everything is a layer of we can pay you for this or pay you for that. But it's important to not just blow us off as far as like, oh, it's vacation time or this or that. There's always got to be kind of someone on call. And that's where we try to expand our group. We try to have a larger number of people involved with redundancy. Like if it's just one paramedic and he can't make it, well, okay, 2. Or if 2 can't make it, then 3. If we got some redundancy, same thing with funeral directors, same thing with the members of the group. So it's about redundancy, backup plans, and so forth. So what do we do? What do we do if someone goes down? I'm going to talk about a couple other things. I have lists that I put together. This book here, I put together. It's on our website. It's in a PDF form. You can download it. I looked over all the case studies for Alcor. I looked over all the case studies for CI and all the other companies out there. And what I found is it's not these little things that are causing problems. We didn't get this particular drug on, or we didn't get the advanced airway or whatever. It's usually easy, low-hanging fruit things like, nobody called the Cryonics Institute. Nobody notified us. So early notification is the most important thing. By far, if you go through all the case reports, the main reason people don't get a good suspension is early notification. So that means poor communications, right? A lot of funeral homes might say, oh, we got this. We're professionals. We got this. We're taking care of this for the family. But what we're asking the funeral homes to do is call us immediately. And if you can call us immediately, now we're on notice, okay? Now the ball is back in our court. And then we can call back, hey, did you do this? We can walk you right through it, real simple. And we might be a little pesty, whatever, but then once the case is done, the case is done. So we can walk people right through it, make sure, and if you care about a professional job, call us, right? Same thing with the paramedics, same thing with anyone in the group. Call us right away. Early notification. How do you go about having early notification, right? How do you go about, well, if you're a person who is in Cryonics and you don't wear your bracelet, right? How many people have a bracelet right now? Okay, those of you who are signed up who don't have a bracelet, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Why? Why don't you have a bracelet?
I have a necklace.
Okay, a necklace. So that helps. But what about redundancy? What if that breaks off? That's, I know it kind of gets irritating, but at least you're doing that. I know some people don't wear a bracelet or the necklace.
Here's a possible concern of mine. People generally ask questions about jewelry you wear, and some of your friends might be more conservative, or they might be more close-minded or whatnot, and you don't want to create the wrong perceptions especially in professional environments. You
right.
Don't want to hurt.
So it might impose upon your level of privacy?
Well, not just privacy, but even just like, the culture you work in can play into it. There was a great scene from a movie I saw once. He was a member of Alcor, or CI, one of the two. This was a character in the movie, and he was wearing this bracelet, and his friend called him out on it. He was like, "What's that medical bracelet?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? He tried to explain it in a serious and professional way. His friend just kind of basically laughed at him and like made fun of him, like shunned him. It's not.
It's good that you brought that up, though.
There's a social stigma attached to cryonics still out there in certain segments of the population.
Right.
That could give some people pause for wearing that. Obviously, if you're older and you're more geriatric.
Mm-hmm. So there's 3 ways of handling that. One way is to just not tell anyone and not wear the bracelet, right? We call that the kind of the reclusive method. And you don't have to worry then about that public scrutiny. But the negative of that is you could also end up not getting cryopreserved after you've put sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars into this. So I would argue that my pride would go to the side when it comes to that. The other thing you can do is you can kind of play a middle road, which I've done with people that I know would be hostile to cryonics. So, and they ask me about my bracelet, and I say, well, I'm donating my body to science when I'm gone. So, which is the truth, right? But I'm not getting into detail about what I'm doing with the science. So that's one thing. Another thing we have for early notification, I learned about this in the fire department. It's called a file for life. So there's a sticker, and I have it in a book. This sticker can go in your, let's see if I have it here. It goes on the front of your house and on your bumper of your car. And it looks like this, right? And then in it is a little information packet. So if the police, paramedics, fire department see your car and you've been in an accident and you can't speak for yourself, they check in your glove box, and in your glove box is all your medical information and cryonics wishes. Same thing about a one that goes on your refrigerator. It's like a refrigerator magnet. And this refrigerator magnet has an information packet as well. And let's face it, even if you're not in cryonics, that's a great thing. You might be a diabetic, so now you're letting them know that I might need insulin or I might need this or that, And you can add your cryonics wishes to it. Go ahead, you have a question?
Yeah. What about a tattoo?
People have done that. For me, that's a little invasive because what if the telephone number changes to one of the facilities? I guess you could laser it off and change the number. Tattoos fade either. It's a lot of information. If you look at how much information is on one of these, it'd be either a large tattoo, but it can be done. And I know there is some cryonicists who've done that, but that is an option. So I have a necklace. I have a right arm bracelet, a left arm bracelet. I'm kind of the walking poster child for early notification. I've got on my driver's license, on the back of it is a sticker. All police, fire, and EMS look at the back of your driver's license to identify you when you're unconscious or worse. And on that information is information that I want to have my body donated to the Cryonics Institute. Call this number immediately in case of emergency and so forth. I also have a wallet ID card. I also have an app on my phone. I've got emergency information. I've got an app on my phone. Let's go over a scenario. Let's say I'm lost in the woods hiking, all right? Or I'm all alone. I could be a long time before I get found, right? Well, if I know I'm going to be all alone, I set this app. Again, this is another product that's great for people who aren't even into cryonics. I set the app on this thing. It's a timer, and the timer says, "Hey, are you okay?" And I can just hit the button. Yeah, I'm okay. And if I hit that button, it resets the timer for another 4 hours or whatever. If, on the other hand, I'm not okay, it's passive. Like they call, there's a passive device for firefighters. If you don't move after so much time, the alarm goes off. It starts flashing a strobe light, an obnoxious sound, so the other firefighters come get you in a smoky building. But you just shake like that or hit the button and you can cancel it and reset it. So this is just basically on your Android phone, you can get it at Google Play, right? I think it's Google Play. We don't have an Android or Apple version yet, but we will. We did team up with Elcor to offer this free app to all members, Elcor or CI, and Elcor is offering their app, which is a pay-for app, $30 per month, but that includes a call service. So I'm going to finish about this app. So what this app does is let's say I do say, oh, I'm having chest pain, I hit this emergency button. It's going to send out a GPS location of where I'm at as well, my last location on a map, in a text to 4 or 5 friends of mine and they can check on me, and if they don't get a hold of me or they get worried, they can escalate that and call 911.
What are some of these apps' names?
This one is just called the CI app.
You look for Cryonics.
Cryonics Institute. Just type in Cryonics Institute, and that should get it.
And the non-cryonics app?
And the what?
The non-cryonics app?
BS Shield or B Shield. And now that one's different. That one's $30 a month. Now, so say on the free app, if nobody answers you or none of your friends answer, unless you put enough friends in there, that could be the end of your usefulness of that app. But everything in this world costs money, so at different levels, we're at Cryonics Institute. We're kind of a la carte. We don't want to leave people out who can't afford maybe a $30 monthly fee. But on the other hand, if you can afford a $30 monthly fee and you're ill or sick, you can use that app. You can turn that on. I mean, I have the free app loaded. I don't use it very often because I'm with people all the time. But when I am alone, I do activate this app. So anyways, the app, the pay-for app goes to a call center. And the call center will check on you. And they might even call me today. I have it set up for noon. And they'll say, hey, are you all right? Do you have anything to report? No? Okay. And then I don't hear from them for another 24 hours. But you can set all different intervals. You can say, I don't want to be bugged at night. I want to sleep, and so forth. So these things make sense just for elderly people or sick people or people who just came back from surgery or living alone, whether you're in Cryonics or not. But it certainly helps us because we don't want to be dead in bed for several days or out hiking or something like that. So the most important thing that you take from here is early notification. None of this stuff, none of this equipment on this table matters if there's no notification, because none of this is going to come into play. You're not going to get ice. You're not going to get CPR. You're not going to get these drugs. Nothing. Or if you do get it, it'll be days later. And at that point, you're a tissue donation, basically. They're saving your DNA. They're not going to save much of the structure of your mind. In the video, they said that the CPR, there's still brain function. I should change it. It's actually brain structure. The function, hopefully, will come later in the future. But we're trying to save the structure of your brain. When you die, you don't just dissolve away on the ground. That's why we call 911, right? Because you might have a chance. And that chance is extended if it's cold ice water. But we're just trying to extend that even further. So let's say you've done your due diligence and you've taken the lowest hanging fruit, this inexpensive stickers and bracelets and so forth. You've done all that stuff. And you've had discussions with your family and friends. And let's say your family and friends do ridicule you, just like that's a good point. They're not on board. The family's not on board. Well, we've had some members that they've decided, well, if my family's not on board, I'm going to disinherit them or something like that, And that, I'll tell you, that's the wrong way to go, because now you've created even greater incentive for your family to have you buried when you're gone, because they're going to go to next of kin legally and say, what do you want done with this person? There's some ways around that. You can designate a different next of kin. Some states have dispositions of remains forms that you can file with you. But the funeral home might not know about that, and they might just start off with what they know, and that's going to the next of kin. and you might be buried, and then, oh, later on we find that paperwork that you're not supposed to be buried, and then they have to exhume you. What a mess, you know. So what I would do, and what I have done, practice of my own, is I set up my own personal will this way. I said, my family is on board. They understand, obviously, that I'm with Cryonics. But I set up my will. If you do what I want, you carry out my wishes, do the honorable thing, then you guys are going to get 90% of my money. But you're going to leave this $100,000 or so alone for Cryonics. And you're not going to touch it. You're not going to go after the organization in any way. If you try to go after that money, if you try to bury me, if you try to not notify on purpose, then you get $1. And then good luck fighting for the estate. And the reason you get $1 is so that you can't say I forgot about you. So that's just a legal, I learned that from a lawyer. But I had this discussion with my wife. She said, well, why would you do that? I said, this will never come into play because you'll do what I want, right? And she laughed and she goes, yeah, okay. But anyways, for the most part, there's things you can do. If you think about it, you can kind of eliminate that hostile family thing. You can say, listen, I'm going to leave you guys money if you do, carrot and stick, if you do the right thing. If you don't, you're not going to get the money. And if they're that hostile, you will have to change the disposition of remains. And you'll talk to the funeral directors ahead of time and just try to get that family member completely out of the mix. But anyways, so let's say you've done that due diligence, right? You've got your paperwork lined up, you got your family lined up, you got all your easy, low-hanging fruit, early notification stuff lined up. And let's say right now I keel over dead, I fall over dead. What are you going to do? I'm going to ask the paramedics. What do you do right now? I just fall over. It looks like I'm having chest pains. Call 911. Why not start with the ice, right? Because you could get in deep trouble. Because if you start with deep, you might actually speed up my death, and I wasn't going to die. I just was unconscious, So call 911, right? And what did he say? That's early notification. Same thing. We're on the same sheet of music. Early notification of the traditional emergency services. Second thing you're going to do.
Start CPR.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, are you all right? Check for a pulse. If I have no pulse, you're going to start CPR. Again, we're no different in Cryonics, right? But we're not in Cryonics mode. We're just in basic life-saving mode. Who here has CPR credentials of any type? Okay. I urge you to do that, not just for Cryonics, because it might come into play. It's easy to do, super easy to do, and once you get it done, the city of Seattle, I believe, has the highest rate of public education in CPR, and they've got the highest rate of cardiac arrest, return to life. So they're teaching it in the public schools. And so it's a great thing. They're teaching it in public schools, grade school, high school, and it's mandatory in their curriculum. And because of that, if you're going to go down, that's the place to go down, is in Seattle. Milwaukee's not too far behind, but a lot of other places they don't even. Only if you're a swimming instructor or a lifeguard or something like that, or work specifically in the medical field, are you going to get that training. Definitely a good idea to get CPR training. So you do CPR, 911 shows up, and basically what's 911 going to do? I'll let you guys tell me what you would do, your 911 showing up.
Well, there's going to be some bystanders there. If you got bystanders doing CPR, you're going to ask them if they saw anything or if they witnessed the cardiac arrest.
Right.
How long you've been doing CPR, that kind of information. And then once they have that, they're going to start in with their equipment, probably put you on a Lucas, start an IV, pump you full of drugs, and run that cardiac arrest.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. So they're going to take over CPR, but in the beginning, it was lay people doing the CPR. Now, what would you rather have? The best cardiac surgeons in the world inside of a hospital doing CPR on you, or Joe, your neighbor, the plumber, or whatever. I'd rather have the doctor, but here's the thing. You know, the doctors aren't always around. You know, you might not be in the hospital. You could be 7 hours away from a doctor. And it's going to be Joe, the plumber, and that's the only person that can do CPR. We're talking traditional medicine. So why is it any different for cryonics? It's no different. A lay person can do CPR. And there's a saying also in the medical community, bad CPR is better than no CPR. Now, that doesn't mean we're striving for bad CPR. It means that a person who's not getting any CPR is really not doing good at all. But if you saw CPR on television, and you know you're supposed to kind of do some push up and down type of stuff on this guy's chest, and you do it, you could save his life. It might not be the best CPR, but the way to learn CPR is you can watch videos, you can go get the training certificates, and we're going to talk about it today. It's currently, I think it's still a 30-to-2 ratio, 30 compressions to 2 breaths. You learn, you know, and you're doing CPR, and you're like, oh, I forgot about the head tilt chin lift, you know, where you kind of, but you were just doing CPR. You know what? Don't worry about every detail at first. Just do the CPR. And then as you catch on, it's like, why aren't these breaths going in good? Oh yeah, that's right. We got to open up the airway a little bit better, right? So at least you got some compressions started. And good compressions are when you go down all the way, right? 2 inches. What is it? What is the inches? 2.5 inches or something like that? At least 2 inches. And a complete recoil to let that heart refill back up, right? At a rate of about 100, I think it is now. Anyways, that's important to get that blood circulating. And in our purposes, it's not just getting the blood circulating for the brain, but you're also cooling the patient down, because shortly after you start CPR, well, let me rewind the clock a little bit. He's declared dead. The paramedics have done their 30 minutes approximately of no response CPR, right? They looked at his cardiac rhythms. He had no shockable rhythms, right? No signs of response to any of their techniques, right? They've got an airway in, they've got an IV in, they've given drugs, and nothing's really changed after a half hour. Usually, they'll get on the phone and they'll talk to a doctor, and a doctor will say, yeah, I think it's time. You do think it's time? Yeah, it's time, whatever. And they'll call the patient at that, if you have the authority. At that moment, that's a half hour of time that we had to notify the Cryonics organization, who maybe called Chuck's group, and Chuck called the funeral director, and the funeral director got over here, and Chuck's group got over here, and someone in Chuck's group brought a bunch of ice, and the funeral director brought the Ziegler case and a bunch of equipment, and that equipment is staged, and all of it's ready to go as soon as the person's declared. And let's say the person's not declared, they take them off to the hospital. Oh, well, false alarm. We got to pay them for getting out of bed, but that's about it. Put all the equipment away. But let's say the minute he's declared dead, what do we do at that point? You want to
Cooling them down.
start cooling him down. I would actually argue I'd start CPR immediately. Right back CPR, because it's going to take a little while to open up those bags of ice and get that water in there. But it's fair to say at the same time, right? You're doing CPR, right? And you bring the ice bath right up to him, and it's got ice in there. You've got a layer of ice. You're doing CPR. You lift up that patient, and if the patient's heavy, you can use a moving blanket. I've got different things. This is called a Mega Mover. It's a really tough blanket that's got handles all over it. Great for sliding heavier patients. I've got a regular traditional moving blanket, and this has dual purposes. You can slide a patient around with that as well. And there's different containers we could use. So one is the Ziegler container over here. Another thing is, I picked this up. This is heavy-duty body bag, like a biohazard body bag with a zipper on it, okay? you can actually, it's waterproof. You can throw some ice water in this thing. It's going to get heavy, but if you get enough people, you can lift it up on a gurney, and then you can transfer it into the Ziegler later. But at least you got something, kind of like a portable ice bath right here. And it's got handles on it, which makes it great for movement. Worst case scenario, you're going to worry about the head. So we have an inflatable hair wash basin, and you can blow this up, and it's for washing people's hair when you're on camping trips or whatever. You blow it up, you put ice water all around the head, and just focus on the head if you have less ice. Worst case scenario, I'd use this first, right, until you can cool down the body. But you want to kind of create an ice-cold barrier at the neck down so the body doesn't continue to reheat up the rest of the head. Because the head is where your brain is, and that's the main thing we're trying to save. We're trying to save both the head and the body, but the seat of your intelligence is in your brain. So we're going to do CPR. We're going to put them in ice. And why water? Why would we add water to the ice?
Makes cooling more effective.
Makes cooling more effective because there's a greater surface area contact to the skin. If you've ever put something in a cooler full of ice, 6-pack of beer or soda, and you put it in with water, it's going to cool a lot quicker because that water is actually touching more portions of that can than the ice cubes are. Only the corner and edges of the ice cubes are touching the can. Another thing we do, and this is later, I kind of set the table down in this direction kind of as we go, but I'm going to skip all the way down to the end. Someone suggested putting a pump in there, and I've got like 2 battery packs. These are basically probably the wrong batteries. Someone suggested I use deep cell battery instead because it'll last longer. These are actually jumper batteries, so it's more of a kick of energy than it is a long lasting. But I've tested them and they work pretty darn good. And I've used like a boat bilge pump that I've set up with all kinds of electrical adapters. And what I can do is I can take ice water from one portion of that ice bath and I can direct it up towards the head. And now I'm circulating the ice water. It's not just static ice water. And think about it. If it's a cold day, right, and it's like 10 below zero outside, that's cold, but there's no wind. But if there's like 30-mile-an-hour winds, it's going to be a lot colder, right? Because of the convection, because of the moving and drawing away of that heat from your body. Same thing here. Your bodies are designed to hold the heat in. I mean, that's why to keep you at 98.6 degrees, And the heavier we are, a bigger guy like me, it's going to keep it in even that much longer. So that's actually a good reason for people to try to lose weight. For one, it's good for your health in general. For two, the longer you're around, the better the cryonics techniques will be. And for three, once you are in the ice bath, it's going to take a lot more ice to cool down a heavy guy than it is a skinny guy. So, and the quicker you're cooled down, the better those tissues are preserved. But so anyways, yeah, you can circulate, and we'll get into this. You can circulate the ice water, and that'll speed things up. We did a study, I think it typically takes almost 12 hours to cool a body down to ice temperatures. The average 200-pound person down to, in a Ziegler, about 12 hours to get them to ice temperatures. Using this pump and circulating, we can speed that up to 3 hours. And there's some other techniques that I've heard them talk about that can speed it up even more, like internal cooling. So ECMO, then it gets really advanced where you're washing out blood and putting ice water in. And I think Suspended Animation does that. Aaron Drake's team, ICE, does that. And sometimes you can employ medical professionals to do that. They've talked about chlorofluoral carbon, that liquid solution that goes into your lungs that carries oxygen. They've been able to keep a pig alive, in a liquid. But the problem is when you try to get all that liquid out of someone's lungs, it washes out all the surfactants and the important layers inside the lungs. But anyways, I digress. That's all. It gets kind of further down the rabbit hole. For our purposes, we just want to cool a person as fast as possible as simply as possible. So the fastest, easiest is just get them on ice. If you can get some ice water, simple pitcher, right? A hose or a pitcher will do. You can just scoop in ice water from anywhere, from the sink or whatever. Let's say you don't have the Ziegler, you don't have the Mega Mover, you don't have anything. What do most people have in their houses that you could put a lot of ice and water in? Bathtub, exactly. So you put them in a bathtub, turn the water on, you get all your ice out of the freezer and dump it in there. Now you got an ice bath. It'll buy you time, and you can still do CPR. Now, how are you going to do CPR? It's so cold that you can't even put your hands in there. So our suggestion is there's two things you can do. You can only fill it up, so it's like halfway up to the person, but that's not going to be as effective cooling. The other thing you can do is there's gloves I have. Here they are. There's ice fishing gloves, but I found these chemical gloves that are insulated work even better. They're even warmer than the ice fishing gloves. They're too bulky for ice fishing. You can't, feel lines and stuff, but the nice thing about this is it's just fine for CPR. It'll keep your hands warm, and you can fill that ice water up. You don't want to usually fill up that ice water beyond the mouth and nose, because you don't want the water and going into the nose and mouth and then mixing and causing all kinds of bio mess out of the patient's mouth and so forth. But anyways, getting back. So how much CPR is needed? So we're doing CPR, we're doing 30 to 2 compressions. How long do you have to do that? Well, if they're warm, you want to just keep doing it and changing out people. And you should be exhausted doing it if you're doing it correct. When I did CPR, sometimes we broke ribs, on people. And you say that sounds horrible that you're breaking ribs on a 80-year-old old lady, But the thought is she's got worse problems than a broken rib at that point if she needs someone to make her heart beat for her. They can fix the brain, but they can't fix the brain that's dying of oxygen starvation. So you want to do aggressive CPR. And you can look up all the parameters of CPR. And you want to be tired. And you don't want to just be leaning on the patient. You want to be coming all the way up to refill the heart, all the way down. And you got to do it fast and deep. And if you get tired, swap out. Just keep swapping people out, swapping them out. And that's why it is important to get them on ice. Once you get them on ice, though, and you get this circulating ice water, I don't believe you don't need to go for the next 3 hours doing CPR. You only need to go, once they drop 10 or 20 degrees, they're not taking up any more oxygen in their cells. It's just not happening. The two things you are doing, you're feeding the brain oxygen, right? You're keeping the blood circulating so it doesn't coagulate, but you're also exchanging the heat, the internal heat in the person's body with the blood capillaries that are on the skin that are touching the slurry ice water. That's real cold, but the internal blood is really warm. But if you're doing CPR, you're doing like a heat exchange, right? So you're speeding up the cooling down of the patient through doing CPR. So you're doing two things. You're speeding up the CPR and you're making those tissues last. Another thing you can do is you can hook up a mechanical device like a Lucas. There's currently, I think, 3 Lucases out. I've got the old Lucas. This is like a $15,000 unit I got on eBay for $500. I got 3 of them for $500. So $45,000 of equipment. That's what happens when it's government money gets spent and they go to the next upgraded, newest thing. But anyways, I got these SCBA tanks. They're like big scuba tanks, but these are for above water. They're used in mining operations or for firefighting. They've got 60 minutes of air if you're breathing. So this Lucas 1, the way it works is it would work on compressed oxygen. The compressed oxygen in the ambulance unit would drive the CPR to go up and down. Well, it's not always easy to get medical grade oxygen and the fittings that go with that. So I got an adapter and put that on and these scuba tanks or these SCBA tanks, can run this machine. They're each 1 hour tanks, so it should be 2 hours of breathing, but I would say about 40 minutes is all you're going to get out of it running the Lucas machine. And we can set that up if we have time. We'll set the Lucas machine up and I'll let you see how it works. But again, this high-tech stuff is not always needed. It's just nice because it saves your back, and it's a nice piece of equipment because you can move patients that are still getting CPR. But it's, this is just as effective right here. A pair of gloves and just rotating people out.
How many people?
The more, the better. It depends on how strong they are. It depends on how much endurance they have. Depends on how quick you get the ice there. A lot of factors. But, I mean, the more, the better. And the other important thing is okay, let's say the ALS crew came in here, the paramedics, and they've established either IV or IO access. IV means it went into their vein. IO means it goes into their bone, right? It's a little needle that goes into their bone. And you ask them to not remove any of the airways or IVs, because then you can take and you can put you can put heparin, which is the most important medication we give, either heparin or sodium citrate, and you can put that into the patient's IV line. And here's the heparin right here. And you can put that in their line, and you can hook up some saline and pump that through. And when you're doing CPR, you don't just inject medications into a patient who doesn't have a heartbeat. You have to do some CPR to circulate that medication throughout the body. So the reason we use heparin is because we don't want blood clotting, and we know that the blood's going to sit in the body for a while. And later on, we want to wash that blood out to put the cryoprotectants in. So those are the main two drugs we're going to use. Another thing is, let's say you don't have an IV line or IO line. What you can do is you can take a needle and you can actually put it directly into their heart. And you can watch videos on how to do that. Like Pulp Fiction, yeah, exactly. Goes right into the heart, injected. The beauty of giving medications to someone who is legally dead is you don't need a medical license to practice. So you don't have to worry about malpractice or anything like that. We're just doing the best we can with what we can. It's like CPR. It's like the Good Samaritan rule. Sure.
Practical question. So you show up at your friend's, whatever, and you've got the heparin and you've got the ice, and you're doing all this. The CPR, the paramedics, they're packing up their stuff, getting ready to leave. I don't know. How are you ask them to leave the IO line in,
Usually they do anyhow.
And they're like, why? It's like kind of strange. It's like, what are you guys going to do with this body? It's like, no, we're going to inject heparin into them. How are most paramedics going to respond when you say, I'm going to start doing all these things with this dead body? Are they going to try to prevent you from?
Well, anything could happen. I think I'd refrain from that conversation. I would just say, please just leave them alone and leave everything the way it is. And most paramedics usually do. And the reason we do is because a lot of times bodies might end up at the medical examiner's office, and they want to know exactly how those procedures were done. Let's say the IV didn't go into the vein, and it was all the drugs were just balled up in the muscle tissue because of a bad IV. Or even worse yet, let's say we're trying to get a airway tube. Now there's two tubes that go down. One goes down the back to your esophagus. One goes down to the front to your trachea, right? One goes to your lungs. One goes to your stomach. If you get the tube in the wrong, or you get the airway tube, it kind of looks like this. This cylindrical tube here. It goes down the wrong hole, and you're breathing. Now all the air is going in their stomach. You're doing them no good. right? And so the medical examiner will determine that you guys didn't help this guy. If anything, you might have actually pushed him over the edge because you're breathing into his stomach and not into his lungs. And so we're supposed to leave stuff in there almost like evidence, if you will. So I wouldn't worry about it. But every once in a while, you might get a new guy on a rig who's starting to clean up, and you catch him starting to pull everything out because he's thinking he's just doing a good job cleaning up. And you have to say, nope, leave that stuff alone. And, and you might, if you're on scene, you might say, aren't you supposed to leave that in case there, that's what I would say. Aren't you supposed to leave that stuff in case it goes to the medical examiner's office? That's all you got to say. Go ahead.
So heparin and sodium citrate, are they both for the same purpose?
Yes.
Okay, so they're just different availability.
Yeah, and sodium citrate works a little better at cold temperatures, which is what we're doing. And so we're kind of switching from heparin to sodium citrate. But
Is one more available than the other two?
it all depends. You never know what supply chains nowadays. The hardest thing for me to get for the longest time was IV solution, saline. 7/10 of the earth is salt water, and somehow the world had a shortage of emergency saline. Tell me how that happens. I don't know. That's a pretty bad screw up. But anyways, then it's always good to have, the most important thing I would say to have is a team leader, is someone who can direct others. This needs to be done. That needs to be, someone who kind of stands back on the picture, okay? And I'm going to be the team leader, and I think we're going to try to run a code, if you guys are okay with that. Yeah, we can break. I just wanted to ask the funeral directors, do you guys have any questions about?
So how I'm looking at it from our perspective, my thoughts are a lot of this is through the community prior to us getting there, because we're not going to get the phone call until after you're pronounced dead, more than likely. Unless you're 5 years old and you have the perfect way of doing it when you're in your hospice, you're laying in bed, you got your ice bath next to you, and I'm just going to say dad, but you are going to die within a day, and hey man, he is going to die within 35 minutes.
Yeah, and unfortunately people don't die perfectly on expiration dates, right?
But that's what because I was thinking about when we're talking about doing all the chest compressions, that's going to, because we don't get the phone call until you're dead.
Right.
It's very rare that someone has a funeral director next to them, unless they're best friends with the funeral director.
Right.
And then I really can't do anything until paramedics say, or hospice.
Till they release the body to you.
Yeah.
So in our case, what they can do, and this is what I've seen many, many times. I've been in a lot of death scenes that are non-cryonic, and sometimes the panicked family will call the funeral director as soon as the code starts, because they know that maybe they've been dead for a while, or they had comorbidities. Maybe they had end-stage cancer or something like that. So they just call, the panicked family just calls everyone.
Yeah.
And the funeral directors show up and they're still doing the code, So the funeral director just kind of stands around and maybe consoles the family a little bit. And then
But that would be good in this situation.
in our situation, that would be good.
If you're smart and because everything else has been planned out to do cryonics. The idea is that you want to plan out, and this is what we talked about Chuck, and it's Henry, right? Who we met with, Hank, who we met with a couple months ago. You get everything pre-needed, you write on the note, hey, I want to go just outside Detroit, and then that way, as long as this is a big room of about 500 people where I got to memorize 500 names, if you write A, B, and C, this is where I want to go.
Right.
We show up with a Ziegler case, it's got the ice in it, and then you have all of your information entered.
Right.
Boom, usually within 12 hours, when you book a flight heading to Detroit.
Absolutely. And some of the funeral homes will even get the doctors to sign some stuff later, or yeah.
We can ship those to doctors. Minnesota, you don't need one.
Awesome.
Even better, or drive it.
Right.
You don't think so? So how does that work? Okay, so someone dies in their home, 911 is called.
I got to sit down for a second. My back is killing me.
Yeah, you don't miss it.
quick, why do you repeat that, the Minnesota specific? law?
Yeah, so I'll just start from okay, CPR didn't work. Now you're dead, you call us. The idea is, if you were proactive, everything you did before, this is gonna sound bad, it's gonna sound like a sales pitch, but you get everything pre-needed, so you have everything funded, there's no questions, you wanna go back, either pick if you're going to Detroit or if you're going down to Arizona, and you would have that all written up, all your birth certificate, death certificate information's already filled out. So then that way it's, hey, John Smith died, he's at this location, come pick him up. And since we know, hey, he's got a record with us, all it is we type in everything on the computer, print out his physician permit, you're on the plane, and you're within usually about 12 hours, we can have you shipped out to Detroit. And if we have all the chest compressions done right, you've already cooled yourself, the Ziegler case is going to have, I don't know exactly how much dry ice, I want to say when we looked it up, what was it, like 5 to 10 pounds of dry ice that's already in there?
Okay, now you're talking, if you're shipping to CI,
Yeah.
or if you're shipping to Scottsdale, you're not going to be shipping with dry ice.
Can you ship with wet ice on the plane? Well, when we looked that up, what did they say? Because you called Delta, didn't you?
I talked to them numerous times, talked to different people, and they assure us that wet ice is okay.
Okay, yeah, even better.
Unless,
Specific dry ice situation.
well, okay, let me put a caveat to that. If we're going to do a perfusion
Yep.
at Elcor, at CI, we need, we don't want dry ice because that will damage the cells.
That's the issue, yep.
Right.
So that's why you want to use the cold ice in the water.
Exactly.
And then don't you want us to do, is it hairpin injections into the chest sometimes?
To put the heparin in, heparin.
I couldn't think of the name, but yeah.
Yeah.
Am I on the right track?
Yeah, heparin or sodium citrate directly into the heart,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of CPR to circulate it, maybe a little bit of CPR to facilitate the cooling, and then we're off.
Ziegler face, drill, go to the airport, or if it's really like, if you can get a flight.
If the patient's been dead for a little while, and we've determined we're going to do a straight freeze, and you'll only know that because you explain the situation to us on the phone, and we've made that decision.
they go, "This is
Then we
the-
say, then pack them with dry ice.
Yeah.
The definition of straight freeze is using dry ice.
Yes.
And that's like when it's too late to do a good job with wet ice.
Yeah, and that's how it would work out best. It's like you get everything written up. You say, these are my exact wishes. I wish to go to CI over in Detroit. It's over in Detroit. Right.
Right.
Make sure I'm getting my tracks right. And then basically, everything didn't work. You didn't come back. You didn't survive the CPR. You didn't survive any of the treatments to bring you back to legal life is how we would look at it. Then medical examiner, nurse, someone declares you legally dead. We are there. And if we get there early, we get there early. I mean,
Right.
but then we would be there early. And the only downside would be we get there early with the Ziegler case and you stand up and walk out of the room. And that's not really a bad thing either.
And that's what we would want you to be, that proactive in getting there before the end of the code if possible.
Yeah.
And if it's too many false alarms, well, you should get paid. You're like on standby.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to waste your time either.
No, yeah.
So
Dry runs happen with us.
Right.
Even if you are fully dead. So, I mean, it happens. Yeah.
Right.
But that's how I look at it. It's like, if you call me and you want me to come out, like I said at the start, that's my job. I'll show up.
Right.
And the worst case scenario, which is pretty good, is you don't die and you walk out of that room and you're like, yeah, it was actually pretty good, man. Just had a hard day.
The other thing we had thought of is actually what we call time bonuses. So the way
How
time.
you get incremental if you get there faster, if you can get to.
Yep. Yeah. You've heard of that. Okay.
Yeah, me and Jeff talked a lot.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we want absolute positive incentive
Yeah.
on
Best case.
hauling butt and getting there and getting us cooled down as fast as possible and shipped out.
What do you think?
The best case scenario might not be that you survive, because what might happen,
Be brain
a lot of
dead.
patient, no, the paramedics could revive you temporarily.
Oh, and then die
In
a couple hours
case,
later.
in transit to the hospital, you guys show up on site at my home or wherever, patient's home. They revive me, resuscitate me temporarily, get me semi-stable, take me by ambulance to the hospital. Now you guys are at that site. Now you guys
Yeah,
are
that's a
chasing
good
the
point.
ambulance across the city to whatever hospital. You got to figure out what hospital they're going to, and now you guys have to navigate the entire
Yeah.
admin network of the hospital. They might not give you immediate access to the body. They're in the process of trying to permanently save you, but in that case, you die after or shortly after you get to the hospital. And then you got
Now, and mostly in those cases, and we've ran into those cases, what we do is, the important thing is there's been some early notification. That means the Cryonics Institute is on the phones contacting people, contacting the hospital. And maybe the hospital doesn't want to talk to us. They're Cryonic. Who? Cryonics what? You know, we're not going to listen. We get the eye roll from them. We've found that the greatest advocate is family members when it comes to that. Because they're not going to thumb their noses at families of dying, loving, the loving members of dying members. You know, it's built into their psyche. This is the people, the Cryonics Institute, we don't care about them, but this is the family. This is our primary golden customer here. We got to take care of them. So we have, a lot of times, like we've had medical examiners or hospitals giving us a tough time. And we've called the family and said, listen, they're giving us a tough time. And if you want to honor Grandpa's wishes, you got to get on the phone and kind of get up their butt. And it works. Excellent.
in my experience, when people are dying, even close family members, what typically happens is the family is ushered into the waiting room. Doctor might come out once every couple hours or hour or so to update the family, but they're pretty much kept isolated. Like when they're in there doing their thing, trying to like keep the patient alive, the
Yeah.
family's not in the room with them. They're isolated because it's
Yeah.
traumatic, you know.
Right.
It's a compassion thing, but it's also a professional thing. So it's not like the family's going to have a whole lot of opportunity to communicate directly with the medical team that's managing the body at that point in time. It might be, 15, 20 minutes after the person's expired when the lead doctor finally has the time to come out and like console the family and kind of let them know. Those are precious minutes.
Yep.
20 minutes is
Yeah.
a long freaking time just because the
Yeah.
doctor can't get to the grieving family. And they need time to like calm down too. And
Yeah, I mean, a lot depends on the approach. If sometimes family members can be overly emotional, and when you get someone if you're too emotional, then you're going to shut down. You're going to close doors with the paramedics and with the doctors and the nurses. But if you can articulate, this is what he wanted, and these are his desires, and in a nice, calm, compassionate manner. A lot of times it's like they say, you trap more flies with honey than vinegar.
And that's why you guys wear the bracelets too, right?
Yeah.
That's why everything. So this is gonna sound weird. You're planning for the long game. You're not planning for like the immediate future.
Yeah.
So if you got all the bracelets, you got everything on your fridge, you got everything on the door. So no matter where you're at, everyone knows your wishes. You have DNRs. You have everything set up. I mean, because there's so many moving parts. The best thing you can do is just hope that like everybody's paying attention and does
Right.
the best they can.
I gotta make another point here, and just re-emphasize what Dennis has been saying. It's probably the most important thing, I think. And you talk about all the variables and stuff. Get Dennis on the phone, or Andy, or whoever at CI, and whoever at Alcor. Get them on the phone, and they will have suggestions at every turn
Yeah.
as to what's the situation in the family. Have you got family there? Can you talk to a doctor? Can we get on the phone with a doctor with the family's permission? From CI. But there's so many variables that Dennis will be able to know what to do in a split second, based on what he's given as basic information. So we don't have to be out there just floundering.
Yeah, and have a plan. Like I said, if you just plan it out ahead of time.
I guess the most important thing funeral directors can do is call us and stay in direct communication with us.
Yeah, the whole way.
And we'll and tell us what they're seeing, and we'll tell you what we know of our experience. Back and forth, it'll be a professional, excellent job. But you did make a good point. I think we should take a little break, and then after the break, I would like to actually run a code, and I'm going to use my paramedics, and then I want to use the two funeral directors, if you guys don't mind, because I think you guys are the most important audience for the rest of us here, that we make sure that you guys know what we want or expect or whatever. So I appreciate that. We'll take a look at the website, the Cryonics Institute's website. There is like a ton of information under the resources tab. We've put hours and hours and hours in there of what to do and why to do it. And one sheet that I hate to read off to you guys, but it really is important. I'll try to summarize. It's titled, You Have Signed Up for Cryonics, Now What Should You Do? Here's a checklist that you might want to consider. Become a fully funded member through the life insurance. When you're young, it's easier to get life insurance than when you're older. And sometimes when you're older, it's either real expensive or they won't even insure you because you've already had a heart attack or you've had cancer or something like that. So it's important to get life insurance early. And so there's two ways to do it. You can get term life insurance and invest the difference of what you would pay if you got whole life insurance. So if you get whole life insurance, you're pretty much covered. It's kind of a pay a lot of money and forget. They invest the money for you. As you get older, your premiums are going to be higher when you're younger, and they're going to stay high your whole time, but they're never going to go up super high. And you're going to have that insurance until the day you die, as long as it's a decent insurance company that you've chosen. And that's entirely up to you. We don't recommend insurance companies specifically. But if you get term life and you don't invest the difference, eventually, as you get older, it's going to get more expensive, and then they're going to drop you, and you will have paid all this money for nothing. Now, that works great for those of us who are using life insurance as protection, paycheck protection for our families, right? In case before you pay off your house and your kids are out of the house, you want insurance, and term is less expensive, and that term might be 20, 30 years, and by then, who cares? You don't need insurance after that. Maybe just enough money to get you buried in a casket. But in our case, we want that money for cryogenics, so we want at least $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, a nice chunk available. The current minimum funding for Cryonics Institute is $28,000. That pays for your long-term interment at the Cryonics Institute. It doesn't necessarily pay for your funeral services. And at the very least, these funeral companies, they're going to want to get paid to be on call, package you up, put you on ice, and zoom you off to the Cryonics Institute. So, I always thought $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 extra is a good way to go. I was just talking. Was it Rob? I was talking with Rob, and I said, maybe some money up front as a retainer to show that we mean business and that you're not going to get stiffed, and then some money on the back end once the job is complete, and you can negotiate whatever that is. It should be probably close to what a minimum funeral would be, and then if you want to add in time bonuses, if you want to add in if there's some false standbys that you pay for, that way everyone's compensated fairly. And at that point, if you wanted to negotiate for different things like a funeral service for the family, or some kind of, that's between you and the funeral service. But anyways, that's point one. Point two, keep CI informed on at least an annual basis of your health status and address changes. You'd be surprised at how many people change their emails, change their addresses and phone numbers, and we lose track of them. And for years, they paid us all this money, and they just assumed that we're psychic and we're going to know where they are and what's going on. And that's not a good thing. We can't help you if you don't let us know where you're at. Keep your family and friends up to date on your wishes. Don't be reclusive with your family. Case in point, there was a woman who put away $250,000 to have this all done, but she didn't wear bracelets, she didn't do anything, she didn't tell anybody. She was embarrassed by it. She thought it made sense logically. She hired air ambulance. She was very professional person. Didn't tell her neighbor, nobody. And she didn't have children and close family. Well, the neighbor who she has the executor, 4 days later, was going through her paperwork and found her cryonics wishes, and she eventually was cryopreserved after 4 days. Well, you know as well as I do, there's a good chance that it's the only thing we're preserving at that point is DNA, and for like some sort of cloning purposes. But the person, all that money and all that time and effort, just because the lowest hanging fruit wasn't addressed, and so I said that's so important. Keep your doctor, lawyer, funeral director up to date on your wishes, and pre-plan and get this stuff in writing ahead of time. The right approach is an asset, and sometimes you might need help in how to communicate with these professionals. Some people are better communicators than others. If you're too passionate about cryonics, you might scare people off. So it's sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's more about professionalism and meeting that professional within their own boundaries of what they're comfortable with. So when I talk to medical professionals, I often change my terminology, and I'm talking about patient advocacy. Patient advocacy this, patient advocacy that. When I'm talking to funeral directors, I talk about patients' wishes, families' wishes. That it's like a ding, 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 a special bell for our professions, And when I'm talking to family members who are hostile to cryonics, I talk about, again, your father's wishes. Let's honor his wishes. Let's do the right thing and stuff like that. Often, the best thing you can do, is put the financial sticks in place to say, you're going to get rewarded if you help me with my cryonics wishes, but you're not going to get rewarded. And let's say I set up my will, $1 if they don't help out, but most of the money if they do help out. I still have to let them know. I have to almost broadcast that. I don't make them even sign a piece of paper that says, you understand this is how it's going to go down. This shouldn't be a secret that if you don't help me, you secretly don't get the money. This is the only way for that threat, if you will, or coercion to work is if you've got the family member in full understanding. Let them know, these are my wishes, and this is the way it's going to be. Consider powers of attorney as well, medical, legal, talking through a lawyer in your area, making sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted. Consider joining a local standby, which you've done here, and if there is none, then start your own. Start it up, and you can start with little things. You see, this is what I call the intermediate kit, all this crazy equipment. Those backpacks over here, these are what I call basic kits. And I'll break them open, but basically it's a small version of this. And it doesn't have all the frills, but it's just something to get you started. We used to sell those. I used to sell these too. It just got to be too much putting it together. So what I've done is just put where I've gotten all these items. I got stuff from Walmart. I got stuff from Amazon. I got stuff from eBay. I got stuff from Craigslist. I got stuff, I just hobbled it all together. Like I said, I got $45,000 worth of equipment for $500 there. Good luck getting that now. But they have better units out. They have lithium-ion battery units now, where you don't need these crazy big air tanks that have to be filled up, and you have to check them and check the pressures on them every 3 years and so forth. So they have got better equipment, but it's all money, Always, always, always wear your identification stuff, whether it's a bracelet or necklace, wallet card, sticker in your wallet, sticker on your car. That, if there's no notification, the cavalry ain't coming. Put together a plan and consider putting together and buying putting together your own basic standby kit, at least a basic, and then test your family and friends. And what would you do? Okay, I'm dead now. What do you do? That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go through that as soon as your father arrives, and then get involved. Here's my pitch: donate time, donate money. Cryonics is not a turnkey operation as much as we'd like it to be. You have to pay attention, and you got to plan. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So it's a very good question. What do you do in the case of an autopsy? The first thing we do, if we know there's going to be an autopsy, is, and if we've been notified properly by the family or somebody, then we call the medical director and we express that this is the patient's wishes. We usually also have documentation that they have religious objections to autopsy, and that has some weight. The patient's wishes were this: he has religious objections to autopsy, and that'll take you so far. However, I will say this: if autopsy needs to be done because there is maybe a crime or something like that, I hate to say it, you don't own your body. The state owns your body. So if the state wants to do an autopsy, they're going to do an autopsy. What we've seen is this depends on the medical examiner and how they are approached. If, on the other hand, they express, we understand you've got a job to do, we understand that you've got a case to prove or disprove or whatever you got to do, if you could minimize the autopsy and maybe keep the patient on ice in the meantime, or do this, or maybe not, if you don't need to cut the brain or whatever, if you could do this. Some medical examiners will be very good, and some have actually canceled autopsies because of our interventions. So it all depends.
Well, in Minnesota, at least, I mean, even if you're Islamic and it's not part of the culture, it's pretty low.
Yeah, it really depends on the medical examiner because there's so much gray area. For instance, I mean, let's put it this way: if you were shot and murdered, you're getting autopsied. Period. There's no way around it. So I actually have that in one of my other things of what not to do to not get cryopreserved.
I got an example. When my uncle died 2 years ago, he was at a nursing home over here. He got pushed by another resident.
Yeah.
Broke his neck and died 3 days later because of his injuries.
Yes.
And Rob went to go pick him up, my son did, and he met the medical examiner at the nursing home. And they said, no, they're going to do an autopsy. So I called, and I know the medical examiner myself personally. I said, there's no reason for this. He's been at the hospital for 3 days. They've done all the x-rays. They know he broke his neck. What are you going to find different? And they said, well, we have to do it. It's the law. I said, I object to this. I said, I know what you're going to do. And my uncle is a firm Catholic, and he doesn't believe in this, and he would object to it too.
Right.
And they said, well, that's great, the object to it, but, we have to do what we got to do. It's our job. So if they think they need to do an autopsy, in that case, there wasn't a gunshot, there wasn't a knife. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, but they're looking at a potential lawsuit of that facility.
Yeah, we're agreeing with you, but.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's tough to get around the autopsy.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be no-go situations with the autopsy, but he may do the autopsy first in front of like 10 other autopsies, and he may keep them on ice for you where they're not keeping the other bodies on ice. If you sweet-talk them enough and you know them and you say, hey, what about this, what about that? Just they're people like anybody else, and if you approach them professionally and if you're nice about it, you might not be able to avoid an autopsy, but you might be able to minimize the damage of the autopsy.
Do these laws need to be changed at the state level or the national congressional level to put safeguards in place for CI patients?
Oh, as far as autopsy goes?
Yes.
I don't know. I think that,
Is it a state regulation type of thing when it comes to autopsies? Or
I think it's
national?
county. I think it's each county decides, but they're all pretty much uniform. They're,
It's all subjective.
yeah, it's very subjective. Like for instance, if I've got an 80-year-old living at home, okay, all alone, that could be an autopsy. There might not be an autopsy, depending on the autopsy caseload of the county. And I can tell you.
And we do cryopreserve autopsy people,
Yes.
whatever's left.
Yeah. Now, here's the big caveat. If they were signed up ahead of time, we have a contract with them, and that's what they wanted, yes. If they come to us last minute and say they've been autopsied, no. But I'm going to come back to questions and stuff, and I mean, it's all good questions, but we're running low on time, and I really want to run these scenarios through. Okay, so I'm going to use my two paramedic buddies here, and we're going to run a simulated situation. Best case scenario, Cryonics. But I'm going to stop in between and say, but okay, if this goes wrong, what would we do? We could do this or do that. So here's the situation. I have a heart attack right here. Boom, I fall over dead right here. Well, you don't know if I'm dead. All you know is this guy fell over. and now suddenly I'm here, but I'm really up there where that body is over there. And I'll jump in and what's the first thing you guys would do? Okay. They're calling 911 and 911 is activated and dispatcher says, layperson do CPR. You're the layperson. If you want to come up here and just push. Actually, here, let's make it easy on you. Here's your body. Just give a few pushes on his chest. Okay. And you've been told that it's 30 to 2. So you go 30, and I'm not going to make you blow into his mouth, but you're just going to say blow, blow. Okay? And now proper compression means you're going all the way down, and it's clicking, and it's coming all the way up. Good. Right? And you're counting out loud. Blow, blow, right? Okay, that's done. So you sit down, the paramedics have arrived. Okay, paramedics, come on up here. Paramedics, you say, sir, we got this. You take over, you're doing CPR, and you're doing one-man CPR, and you're grabbing your equipment. You got a Zoll device, and you're going to check and see if he's in a shockable rhythm. Or you're going to check for a pulse. Hey, buddy, wake up. Make sure he wasn't doing CPR on a non-conscious guy.
The bystander, like how long you've been doing CPR. Did you see what happened? When's the last time you saw him alive, if there was a witness arrest?
And he says, no, I just saw him. He just collapsed here. I don't know anything about his medical situation. He does have a bracelet on his arm of some medical type, but it doesn't say diabetic. It says something about cryonics.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we'll continue CPR, obviously.
I'm do CPR.
No, I mean, you could verbalize or something.
And then while CPR is being performed, I would put the patient on the monitor.
Okay.
And
He's not in a shockable rhythm. He's
Okay.
in a systole.
sure. So we'll continue CPR. In that case, we would start with an IV. High-quality CPR is also really super important. If we had a Lucas, we would certainly put them on the Lucas, and then that frees us up to do...
Okay, we will get to the Lucas later. What else would you do before the Lucas? Let's say the Lucas isn't available.
Sure.
Do airway.
Airway. What kind of airway would you use?
Probably just an oral airway at first, and then we could move to something more advanced.
Okay, so perfect. So you guys are actually jarring my memory on this too,
So
so I can remember.
there was a day when advanced airway was one of the first things we did, right? So you get here, oral airway, you start CPR, and within minutes of the cardiac arrest,
Yeah.
you would go and intubate the patient, and that has all kind of changed. And we don't even think about intubation until at least 10 minutes into the arrest, and then depending on how things are going.
And why is that?
Because
What's the most important thing?
CPR, high quality CPR and electricity.
All of this fancy dancy stuff takes a second seat to the simple hand compressions, what I had you do and what he knows to do. It's important that he does 30 to 2. What happens if you forget the number, 30 to 2? What are you going to do?
Keep doing it.
Just keep doing it. What happens if you forget to breathe? Just keep doing it. They have what's called hands-off CPR. Let's see, he's got vomit, vomit coming out of his mouth, and you don't want to touch it. I'll tell you what, if it's my loved one, I'm take my shirt and rub it off. I don't care about the vomit. I'm going to breathe for him. It is better. I believe it is better. But no CPR because you're squeamish about some vomit on their mouth is going to kill the patient because you're not helping at all.
If there is a lot of that, do you turn their head to the side at all, or does that cut off the airway?
Excellent idea. You can turn the patient, you can roll them to their side. If there's towels around and like fluids either coming out of their mouth or they've lost their bowels or urine, I know it's gross, you can throw some towels or blankets. Most people have blankets and towels around. Or you can slide the patient over out of the mess and continue. You just got to keep going, okay? So they're doing CPR. He's in a non-shockable rhythm, so that Zoll kind of, we're not going to use that. You get a doc online. Let's say you've established IV or IO, and I'm going to show everyone what IV IO looks like. IO might look like this little device here. I don't know what they're using lately, but this is an old Jamseed. So it goes into their thigh here, into their tib fib, or they might put it in their humerus up here. You see this, and they'll see a cord coming out of it. And the cord will look like this. Oops. Thank you. You'll have an IV bag, saline. You have this IV tubing, right? And the IV tubing will have these little ports, these little blue ports. You unscrew them, and you can take the syringe, and you can screw it in and give the drugs. And that's what the paramedics will have done. They will have given, epinephrine to increase the quality of CPR by constricting the blood vessels and so forth. They'll give fluids to make CPR better because now the pressure is a little higher. Okay, so all these cords, that's what those cords are left in the patient. They might be an IV line hanging out. They'll have that stuff hanging out. And now he gets on the radio with the doc and he says, we've been working this guy for a half hour, He's got a history of heart disease. He's had 3 heart attacks or whatever. And it's just not looking good. And his pupils are fixed and dilated, meaning that, he hasn't had oxygen to his brain very long, even though we're doing the best we can, right? Doctor says, whatever you call it, 1099, we call it, and here's the time, okay? But a half hour has transpired. In that half hour, me as a team leader, who was the family, the friend, whoever, I'd called CI, said, hey, Andy, patient so-and-so is in cardiac arrest. Andy says, okay, I know who the funeral director is. I'm going to call that funeral director. The funeral director has been on his way, and they come in, and they bring that Ziegler, right? And they have some of this equipment, maybe, in the Ziegler. And we asked the paramedics, hey, can you guys do a little bit of CPR until these guys come? And they might say, no, we got to get back on another run. Or they might say, all right, we'll give you 5 minutes, all right? So
I'll tell you, once time of death has been established and they've stopped resuscitation,
you're not going to do it.
they're going to leave.
Yeah, okay.
And if you ask them to do CPR,
Don't you stay till the police come at least?
sometimes, but police are usually there pretty darn quick. So
Okay. So, yeah, they're not going to do CPR. So I digress. They're not going to do any CPR after time of death. So then the funeral director shows up and or the team leader jumps in there. So let's say I jump in there and I'm doing CPR. The bag valve mask is still here if you guys left it. So I'll show what that looks like. That's this device here. And it's not important that they're hooked up to oxygen at this point, I don't think. And this here device is called an impedance threshold device. Do you guys use those? Okay. So with the impedance threshold device, you pull off this tab and flip this thing, and there's a little light. And the beauty of that is that light tells you when to breathe for the patient. And you're going to breathe just enough so there's chest rise. Okay? But you know what? If you don't have this big valve mask, what else can you do? You can go like this and blow with your mouth through this mask, and that gives you a protective barrier so you don't put your mouth exactly right on the patient's mouth. So these are really nice to have. And in fact, I have those in those smaller kits. And it's nice to have not just for cryonics. Again, you could come up on a car accident or something. You could save someone's life in a traditional sense. Okay, so now we're doing CPR. The ice bath shows up. Let's say the ice bath doesn't show up. What do we say we could use? We can,
Tub.
We can use the tub.
Ice water.
But what if we're outside and not around a tub? We can use the body bag, right? Say the guy is kind of heavy. We can use the mega mover to slide him around, right? Or the basin. Put ice water around his head only. All right, I think that's it for you guys. I'll call you back if I need more. Sure. So these guys are going to know what to do instinctively. But immediately, as soon as possible, they're going to do everything they do in a regular code, but the only thing they're going to do differently is put them in ice, okay? Now, if you guys are hired for us, like you are, okay, and they've called the code, now you guys are going to continue doing CPR, right, if you show up, right? And then you're going to have the two drugs to give, which is heparin and sodium citrate. And one thing that what I learned as a rookie giving medications is when you put a needle in these vacuum cylinder things, so I just put a needle in and I just try to draw off, it doesn't want to come out. What you have to do is draw air up into the needle, put it into the medication, pressurize it, and then draw the liquid out. Otherwise, you'll never get that liquid out. And that's something that, it's just something little, but if you haven't seen that before, these guys are going to know because I'm sure it's happened to them or they've been trained. But it's just one of those things that if you don't put air in, it's not going to want to let the juice out. So let's say these guys aren't available and it's you, the funeral directors, just remember to pressurize it with a little air before you pull out the medication. Okay, you've given medication. These guys are going to know instinctively to do what right after you give the medication? Flush it, and what else? To circulate it, right. So flushing it just means take a little saline and push the medication so it's not sitting in that little bit of tubing, getting it into the whole patient, right? And then circulating it, because he doesn't have his own heartbeat, you got to cause that fake heartbeat to circulate that medication so we don't have the coagulation. Okay, now we get them in an ice bath. We get them into this ice bath here, and we have lots of coolers around. One important thing with that is where does the ice come from? Do you guys have 24/7 gas stations around here? Do you have them mapped out? And or do you have ice in a couple large bags of ice in a freezer at the funeral home or at a couple of people's houses or whatever? Go ahead.
Dollar Tree's just recently have started selling bags of ice for like 99 cents. They're quite large, I believe they're 20-pound bags. They're generally large chest freezers full of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Most cities and towns have those locations like within close proximity. They're open till 10 p.m. most nights. So
okay.
they're from like 9 a.m. to like...
So it's good to, I'd go to redundancy and I would have these places mapped out. And then I would also, ahead of time in your area, the second thing I would do is have some in my freezer at all times, some bags of ice. And, if you think it's getting stale or it's getting like solidified in one big chunk, then buy a new one, use that one for beer and soda or whatever, and just, rotate your ice that way so you have loose ice. And always have some on hand, and also have, because like you said, if they're closed at 10, and it's just our luck, it's going to happen at 11.
Fast food restaurants have started selling ice to the public in large 20-pound bags now. Wendy's notably, they're open till 11
Okay.
o'clock p.m.
That's great information, yeah.
You could buy ice there for 99 cents too, and they'll sell you dozens and dozens and dozens of bags. They have large commercial freezers on standby in most cities, fast food places.
Okay. Now, Chuck, do you guys have a Lucas unit?
Yeah, we've got one sitting over here. I don't know anything about it. I don't have any oxygen tanks with it, that's for sure.
Is it a Lucas 1 that runs on the oxygen?
And I haven't even opened up that bag there. It's sitting right there by the donuts.
Okay, I'll take a look
I
at it.
just snatched one up because I'm just trying to move things.
Another device, okay, he's in the ice bath, okay? He's got the medications. The medications have been circulated. Funeral directors are definitely either here or on their way, right? Paperwork's been pre-filled out. The money, at least the deposits have all been filled out. You guys know where to go and what to do. So we're gonna take, after that, we're gonna add the ice water, and let's say we're driving them from here to Cryonics Institute. We're gonna take this device, basically a boat bilge pump, right? And we're gonna hook it up to this battery device. Here's a test. This thing is sat for a while. And you know what? It shouldn't sit that long. Every time you guys do a meeting, what you should do is run the equipment. Test run it. And then that way, you can check the batteries too. Make sure the batteries are charged.
So say you're not going to Michigan, say you're going to Arizona and you're going to fly down.
Okay.
You would just use the Zebra case so it's cold water. You wouldn't use the bilge pump straight there. Because I don't think you bring it on the plane.
Well, I would use the bilge pump to circulate the ice water as much as you could before it goes on the plane. Yeah, because it's, and then you can even take that ice water, right, that slurry of ice water, and then use the bilge pump after you've circulate. And the whole time you're circulating, another thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking this digital thermometer. This can be inserted in the patient's nose, back into their nasal pharynx, and you can use like an earplug to hold it in, all right? And you plug this in and you can check now you know the temperature, a good approximation of the patient's brain. And again, you only want to get down to ice temperature, right? So you're looking at this, and you don't have to get right down to ice temperature. You're not going to get below it because you're only using ice, right? And it's going to take, like I said, hours. We're circulating, so it's like 2-3 hours, okay? You're not going to get them on a flight immediately anyhow. It's going to take at least probably 2-3 hours to get them on a flight, right? So you got that much time to circulate the ice water, even in the back of a vehicle. And the beauty of this is I actually have it hooked up so you can plug it into your ashtray or your power unit of your car, the cigarette lighter / power unit or whatever.
With that digital thermometer, are you talking about actually inserting it into some of the soft tissue up in the nasal cavity, or just like
No, just
till it's
just in the nasal cavity and the sinuses. About this far.
that far? Like
Yeah.
that much you can?
Yeah, it can be sticking out because what it's going to do, it's going to go down the nose and then it's going to go into the back of the throat. You can alternatively, you could go right in the back of the throat.
Can it get stuck up in there? Or?
No, you just pull it out. It's like a big noodle. Okay, and so you're monitoring the temperature. You're circulating the ice water, which is like being on a fan. And let's say you flight time is coming now, but you got the patient as cold as you want them to get, right? I mean, they're going to continue to get colder, but you're happy that you don't need CPR. You only need CPR in the first 10, 20 degrees. After that, you can cut with the CPR. It's not doing anything anymore. Okay, so now you're just circulating ice water, and you're getting it down, getting the patient lower and lower, and time to pack up for the airplane. What you can do is take this ice water and suck all the water out, dump that water, and then repack them with ice, fresh ice. Now for the airlines, you're not going to have water, you're going to have fresh, solid ice. It's colder. You've already pre-cooled the patient with the ice water. Now you're just going with regular ice, and you're not doing that circulation anymore. So they're not going to get any warmer. They're just going to get colder slower. But the point is, you got them pretty cold quick. That's the point of this device here. And got this trickle charger I got. Battery Tender Junior. I don't know if I'd go with these anymore. I've been told by someone who knows batteries a little better that I should go with a marine grade, smaller deep cell battery. Because a deep cell, we can run it all the way down and charge it all the way up. And so it runs for a long time.
Now they have power stations that are, they're the same thing, only they're lithium ion, right?
So they're light, yeah,
They're light
and
they have
powerful.
Power.
Yeah, so again, how much money you want to spend. These are old. I bought these because they were cheap and back in the day, and they worked. So basically, I would hook these things up. Actually, this one is a lithium ion. Let's see if it works. Here's the moment. The reason I left this long cord on there is, let's say these die, and I want it, and it's in a vehicle, and we're driving, then we can just plug this into that power source and use the car's power to run it. But then I got an adapter here somewhere. I had too many cords. Oh, here it is. I could come up with better connectors for this, I'm sure. There we go. So basically, it's just a basic bilge pump. It uses, what is this, like 3 amps, 600 gallons per minute. That's a lot of water for what we're doing. And then I would direct this with these gloves towards the neck and head of the patient. Occasionally, down the whole body, but then mostly focusing on the neck and the head. Some people have come up with rubber devices where you have like a bunch of split offs, and you can have like a split off that goes to the groin area and under the armpits to cool the whole body. But the general focus, I think, is the head and the brain. And that's just one backup for that. Always good to have 2 or maybe 3 batteries, redundancy. And you could even get AC DC adapter. So if you're in a house, you can just plug into the wall socket and you don't have to deal with these batteries. So that would be another backup. You just keep adding on. And the trickle charger is a good thing to have on those batteries. And then another thing I would do is like put a little tag on the battery of what year it is. So after 2-3 years, time to swap out the battery, or use this for something else, like maybe jump in a car, but not using it for the Cryonics. So anyways, that's the battery backpack and circulation for the ice water. Here's your temperature gauge.
What temperature ideally should when you insert the probe into the nasal cavity, what is the ideal temperature that you're aiming for when it comes to, you want it close to?
Well, if 32 degrees Fahrenheit is freezing, 33 would be fine. But we're probably not going to get to it. We're probably going to be transferring, They'll probably arrive at the Cryonics Institute at 35 or something like that. But then we're going to start pumping them with fluids through their vascular system that are fluid lower than 32 degrees.
So realistically.
So we're going to bring them down cool
So
real quick.
realistically, you'll probably get them no further down to like 40 degrees when you have them on, right before you put them on the plane when you.
Yeah, it really depends. It really depends. You definitely want to get them as cold as you can before the plane, but you don't want to delay the plane. And you also don't want to go, well, then dry ice is better. We'll just put them on dry ice. Unless you're going for the straight freeze and you've already given up on the perfusion aspect of things. And there's reasons for that, and you'd call us and say, what should we do? And we'll say, that's a straight freeze. You know, a lot of overseas situations are straight freeze. I think you had your hand up first.
And I hear that you want to avoid freezing, like sometimes, you think, well, it's 20 below, they sit outside for a while, that's even better, but we don't want to freeze anybody unless it becomes a straight freeze situation. And we don't want to get them stuck in an airport sitting outside on the tarmac in some circumstance where they're going to end up freezing, getting too cold in 4 days or whatever.
Absolutely. Another thing is once they do get packed up in the Ziegler case, you can take the moving blankets that you had, you can wrap the moving blankets around the Ziegler case, and that provides insulation. I think people, you were talking about moisture barriers. They can use moisture barriers as well to wrap around the Ziegler case and then set them up on these blocks so that it doesn't, and then you put all that insulation at R19, or I got this out of some item that was shipped to our house that needed to stay cool. So you can double stick these with double-sided tape on the outside of the box all over the place. Then we wrap it in a blanket. That'll hold the coolness in, or keep the heat from the outside getting in a lot faster and make it a lot better. Some people have, like I think Cryonics UK, a couple other outfits, they have containers for the outside that they've designated. They've got handles, nice handles like this, slots for forklifts that go underneath, and they come out like this far, and then it's all insulation in there. And then they have off-gassing vents so that they can have dry ice in there, even on an airplane, because you want it to off-gas. If it doesn't off-gas, dry ice becomes like an explosive. So I think that's an airline regulation, obviously. There should be a one-way vent. So basically, the pressure can go out, but nothing comes in.
That's something we would have to put in your
Well, it depends, how tight you wrap it, you got to have a little bit of wiggle room for that gas to get out. So I know these Ziegler cases themselves, they have kind of like a weather seal type of thing, like a gasket between the lid so that any body fluids or whatever don't get out. So what another thing you can do, well, see, this is more international, long distance. If you're going to be a straight freeze and you're going to be long distance, we say slow down a little bit. Instead of trying to get us the body immediately, what you can do is you can keep cooling that person down with dry ice, but also cool down those regular ice pack brick things or packet things, cool them down to dry ice, because the airlines will only let you ship so much dry ice. So if you get the patient and these packs and everything down to dry ice temperatures, and you got so much dry ice in there, the maximum that they'll allow, that dry ice will start sublimating or basically evaporating. But the rest of that whole patient and all these things will form like a cold ballast, right? So you don't have the patient and all these packets fighting the dry ice. They're all the same as the dry ice. So all of it is pushing out the heat, and it's going to take a lot longer. It buys you a lot more time, and we've kind of done studies on that. How much dry ice is left after we unpack the patient at CI, And there's a lot more so we tell them, take 4 days to continually get that patient at super dry ice temperatures for 4 days, then send them to us. That's kind of counterintuitive. Why would you wait 4 days? But at dry ice temperatures, things have really slowed down metabolically.
In other words, once there's a dry ice situation, you're going that route.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about a real immediate plane flight or anything because you can keep them around.
Yeah, you can wade through all the international bureaucracy. You can sit at a border for a couple weeks and all that, as long as you keep replenishing the dry ice. Can't stay there forever. I mean, like 3-4 months now, I see damage starts to.
Because people without contracts haven't done that. Is that the case?
Yeah.
They put somebody on dry ice while they're waiting for the funding to go through?
Yeah, there's someone who had someone on dry ice for decades now, and that patient is completely non-viable as far as I'm concerned, because dry ice is not cold enough for what we do. It'll save you for months, but not for years. So.
How many months?
I don't know exactly. And I mean, don't mark my words on it. It's just on average, like I say the safe zone is 3 months, maybe 4 months. So this here, particular airway, I don't know if you guys have access to combi tubes for.
So the combi tubes, we don't really use anymore. That's a King airway.
Or King airway. Do you use Kings?
We use iGels, but
Oh, see, I've been out of the game for a little bit. But something like this is kind of, I call it idiot-proof compared to ET tubes, because you just put it in, and you don't have to be specific about getting it into the endotracheal canal. This is designed to go into the esophagus. And what will happen is this cuff, when you take this syringe and you blow it up, this cuff will inflate and at the esophagus, so the stomach acid can't come up, right? The only way the stomach acid could come up is there's a split divided tube, right? And if it comes up that tube, you can actually vacuum it out through a suction. The front tube is the air tube, and this will block off the top of the airway, and well, basically my anatomy's going. It's above both the trachea and the esophagus. Yeah, supraglottic airway. And so this here tube here, when you breathe down this portion of the tube, has to go into the trachea. So now you're bagging and you're getting it down the trachea. And then this back part of the tube, if you want to take and give this other drug, our second most important drug, is Malox, basically, antacid. And if you take a syringe and you inject that down the back purposely into the esophagus, that'll neutralize the acid in the stomach. Okay? So if you forgot to do this, it's going to cause damage to the patient's body because the stomach acid could erode that lining and cause damage. But it's not doing damage to the brain as far as we know, right? Unless it sits there long enough. So it's important, but not as important as that first one. Yes?
So you arrive on site after the paramedics have already done CPR. They've called it time
Yes.
of death. They've left the trachea tube, the
Airway tube, yeah.
Airway tube in there. You put the Malox in before you start your own CPR because you're continuing.
No, I do the CPR well before all of that stuff.
Well, no, they've been doing the CPR. But
Yeah.
like now you're taking over for them because they're packing up and they're going away.
Right.
You taking over CPR while your friends continue to cool the body with ice and water. You put the Malox down the trachea tube. How far does that intubation tube stick out of the mouth, and can you use one of those masks over the face to continue to give air after every 32 contractions?
So I'll let you look at it here.
Because I actually have those masks. I've got a couple of them.
So the bag valve mask hooks up here, and that goes down the front of the tube. It has nothing to do with this back tube. That back tube there goes to the stomach.
Yeah.
So you can inject there. I mean, this might be in the way. You might have to pull that off. You can inject it down there, and then just put that back on and continue breathing.
You said use a syringe, but I'm talking about the oxygen.
Big valve mask?
No, it's on the dummy over there. Because you're gonna wanna give, a couple of pumps of oxygen every 32 minutes.
Well, you're not going to need this because this will be in their throat now. Now this thing here is going to be hooked up here.
But see, I don't have one of those, I just have that thing right there.
You just have this.
Yeah,
Okay, well then, if you don't have one of these, you can't administer the Malox. And you just skip that step.
you just skip the breaths every 32,
If you don't have this, and all you have is this,
and the tube is in the intubated body, because they left that in. Paramedics have left that in.
oh, I see. Usually,
Back it up.
yeah.
They're no longer doing it. They left it in.
They should leave this too. Well, they might not.
They're gonna
I'd
wanna
ask
keep
them.
that.
Huh?
They're gonna wanna keep that.
No, they throw them out. This is one use. Yeah, they might take it with them. I would,
They would leave it on scene.
okay, yeah. Yeah, so I just use it, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you can't use this on a second person because there's always fear that some blood or mishmash got on it. Right, right. Here's another device. It's a colorimetric, I don't want to break it open, but it's a little device that changes colors. Lets you know for sure that you're breathing in the right area. If it turns gold, it's good, and if it's purple, it's poor. It means that somehow the tubes got mixed up. You have to take the tube out and re-put it in. This is a little bit more advanced. I'm just going through the equipment. Probably not as important for you guys. I've got a sharps container for all the needles, a clipboard, someone to document the times, a timer, a magnetic timer you can stick there on the side of and just like put down all the times so you know when the CPR started, when the presumed death was, when they got on the airline, that kind of stuff. Here's another device I picked up. I'm not sure if you can get these anymore, but this kind of makes CPR idiot-proof.
Call 911. Remain in place. CPR rescue as shown on the card. You should do at least 200 chest compressions in 2 minutes at a depth of at least 2 inches. Push hard, push fast. Push, 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 push.
Walking you right through it. You got a light as a cue, right? You heard it, he says 20. That's a cue. So he's counting off 20s and 40s. So at the time it was 20 to 2 or whatever. That's how old this is. You could do the 2 breaths. What happens if you get it wrong, 20 or 30? Not a big deal, as long as you're doing the CPR. It's a nice little cue to show you how to do it, how fast to do it. It's timed out perfectly for you.
They ran studies that showed that it was 32 per 2 breaths were more effective than 20 and 2 breaths.
Yes. Yeah. That number has changed so much. I remember when I was in the Marines, it was 5 to 1. That's what they had us doing. So sometimes I think they change a bunch just to justify their jobs or whatever. But no, they do studies and they find out what works and what doesn't, what works better. Let's see. Another smart device to have, I guess, is you got these screws that you got to put in. You can do them by hand, or you can get a simple power drill with backup batteries. Anything to speed up the process. Let's see. I'm going to save the Lucas unit for last because it's kind of noisy. So we got the patient all packed up. What do? They shipped off to the airlines. What would you do at that point?
Check your equipment, pack it up.
Pack it up, call CI, let them know. Patient shipping, what's the airline? What's the flight number? When's their expected arrival time? As much information, good communication, that's mainly for the funeral directors. We got another one of those 30 to 2 doohickeys. Well, this one's got the updated. This one's got sodium citrate in there, and it's got a needle that you can put directly into the heart. So let's say Pulp Fiction style, you don't have the IV. Paramedics didn't show up, but we know he's dead. He's been declared dead somehow. You legally know that, right? Maybe you picked them up at the hospital or whatever. Get them out into your ambulance vehicle or whatever you got. You want to speed things up, you can go directly right into the heart and then do CPR.
Is that something we could ask the paramedics on site to do for us? Like,
They wouldn't do it. These guys might, unofficially after they're declared dead. Or you could do it. You're not going to get in trouble because it's a dead body. You're not performing medicine on license.
if you miss the heart or inject into the wrong chamber, will you do damage with the heparin?
No, you just won't do any good.
Oh, I mean, that's important.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it really won't do any damage. I mean, it just won't work because you won't. We can get it. CI gets it. So you'd have to.
Can we legally buy it, or can we legally possess it? What are the state laws regarding drug classes and heparin?
Well, it's not in a controlled substance. Nobody abuses heparin, You'd be surprised, though. I think some people would if they could.
Sodium citrate?
Sodium citrate is a food preservative in its most common usage.
Historically, used for anticoagulation in blood transfers.
Yeah.
So it's been used for the purpose, same purpose.
Yeah.
In history, so.
But we're using it in concentrations that are much too high for living people anyhow.
I mean, I see sodium citrate in powdered form at the grocery store. Obviously, that's not the citrate we're looking for.
No, you just get it from us. And we have our sources. We get them directly from chemical suppliers, and we also get them from veterinarians, and we have also doctors on staff that will prescribe us medications that we need.
What is the shelf life of heparin?
It's all different. You have to look at the concentrations, and some of it comes in a powdered form, and then we have to add saline to it to reconstitute it. That usually lasts longer than the stuff that's been already reconstituted.
And that has to be stored under refrigerated temperatures, and it has to be swapped out every couple of months, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be as worried about the expiration dates. I think they do have a longer shelf life than is medically. We're not going to treat it quite the same as we would regular medical medications, because it's still useful for what we're doing. The patient's got a lot more to worry about than a slightly expired heparin. They've got to have tissues, reverse engineered, ice damage. I mean, there's just so much. It's kind of small potatoes to worry about it being expired for a week or so. I mean, you don't let this stuff go for years. The only drugs we're going to worry about is the heparin, sodium citrate, and Maalox. 99.99% of all cryogenic suspensions can be good or bad, not based on the actual, missing out of one of these drugs or whatever. It's because of the early stuff I told you. Non-notification, not getting iced down quickly, family members standing in the way, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to continue going through this kit just to show you. It's a little redundant. You got your body bag. This is the shower basin for the head only. Actually fit a lot in this little pack. The Mega Mover for moving the patient. And in the front section, the digital thermometer for checking the temperatures. And the gloves for CPR and ice water. So you could run a code with this little bit here and ice chest. Because what would you do? You'd have your ice chest, a bunch of ice. You'd get the patient in, you'd make the Mega Mover, move them over to a nice area where you got plenty of room. You take this either head basin, depending on how much ice you had, or this waterproof biohazard body bag. Get the patient inside there, take that ice water, scoop it in there, continue while you're doing CPR with this device that tells you, push now. You got your bag valve mask, you start breathing for them. You give your injection of sodium citrate or heparin into the patient's chest. You got your gloves, right? So you don't get your hands too cold. Then you got your thermometer, you check the temperature. Temperature goes down to where you want it. Then you take and wrap the patient up. You can use the Mega Mover. You can use any blankets you have around the house, wrap them up real tight and in that ice bath, and hopefully the Ziegler or some better device will come along for restoring the patient. Yes?
You're saying it's good to wrap the body in a blanket and then
Once
ice and water?
No, once it's in this ice water, right, there's not a lot of insulation. It's just a thin waterproof sheeting. So the more blankets you can get on the outside, you'll keep the heat from getting past the ice. So you're just holding that ice against the patient. So if you got blankets, you got something like this moving blanket or any blankets in the house, this Mega Mover that you use to move it, all of it, just wrap it up like a big burrito. And that's that, I think.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
It sounded like you said heparin or sodium citrate. It's one or the other.
I would do both. But first, I would do sodium citrate first, and then heparin. Oh, this is a wellness check app. So, like I said, we're working. Cryonics Institute has. Hello.
First, calling to check in with you today.
Hi, I'm fine, and I have nothing to report.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So what that was the app that I was telling you guys about. We've offered our app to all LCOR members, and they can use the CI app, which is free, because we're trying to, the two organizations are trying to come together and do what's best for the whole of Cryonics. So we've offered, not everyone can afford $30 a month, so we've offered our app for free. For LCOR members can use this app. It's a timer. It goes off. It says, hey, are you okay? And if you're okay, then the next thing you know, it resets for another 4 hours or whatever. And if you're around people, I don't use the app. But when I'm alone, maybe in the woods working or something like that, I'll use that app. And the worst case scenario, I'll be down for 4 hours. I could set it down to an hour if I really wanted or whatever. I think that the minimum on the app right now is 4 hours. And I can shut it off when I want to sleep. I don't want to be bugged while I'm sleeping. What that app will do, if I don't say I'm okay, it'll send a GPS signal and a text message. This is where I was last at, GPS on Google Maps. And hey, I might need help. And it'll send it to 3 of my friends, or 4 of my friends or family members, or you could even send it to CI or whatever. And then what they'll do is if they can't get a hold of you after enough time, they might call the police and they'll search for you. So, but there's a barrier between, you don't just go straight to the police because you don't want false alarms. So that barrier is your friends and family. But if your friends and family aren't available to respond, you could kind of be screwed there. So what LCOR does with their app, is they have a 24/7 service, and they've now offered their app to CI members. So our members, if you want, you can set it where they just call you daily. So I'm in a test mode right now. So they just called me to say if I'm all right. And I say, yep, I'm all right, and I've got nothing to report. Okay, then it won't bug me for another 24 hours. And I can change this. I could set it for every hour if I want, whatever. But I left it on at 12 o'clock here just so I could show you guys how it works. So how that works is if there is people going to be there 24/7 dedicated to answering or checking on me and calling the other way, they got to get paid, right? So it's $30 a month for that service. Elcor doesn't make money off of it. They charge that to our members at cost and their members at cost. So it's a kind of a collaboration. If you got $30 a month you want to put at this, go ahead and do it. If you want to do it for free, there's that, but it's not going to have the live 24/7 people.
Don't worry to send out an announcement over 65 is free for them.
Okay, so
Over 65.
so that makes sense. So people over 65 years of age, I'll have to talk to Pat and see if that applies for us.
One thing that's becoming really popular in the AARP community, shall I say, is all these life alert type things you wear around your neck or on you at all times. It's like a push button thing that you send, like it's an SOS signal type of thing.
Yes.
I've heard, some of them you can take with you to the grocery store. Some of them only work in your home. Me personally, I would only use one that you could use anywhere, but
Right.
that's just me.
This can be used like that too.
Is
You can
there-
panic button
Is
this.
there a company that does both, that has the panic button that you can use anywhere and has like a thing where you could set it up where they call you whenever?
Both apps do that.
Okay.
Both apps allow you a panic button. So
Not just on your phone, but like a rechargeable device you could wear around your neck or something in case you fall or something.
I'm not aware of some. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of this in this company, a little bit of that in that company, a little bit of that in that company. Like you got your Apple Watch pulse detection, you got your phone apps, timers checking with 24/7, or with you got your GPS location. You know, has anyone pulled it all together?
Yeah.
I wish, but no, not yet. It's got to be coming. But we keep saying that it's been coming for the last 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. I do believe it'll happen. The main problem, and we talked about this earlier, with pulse detecting watches that run in the background and do everything, is battery. The battery usage for a watch that's going to be running like that is pretty heavy duty, and even companies with billions of dollars like Apple haven't quite figured that out.
Or Elon Musk.
Right. But give them time, and maybe they will. You know, I think it's battery technology, and then you pull it all. But there's other aspects of it. There's probably like legal too. Like if you're messing, is this a medical device? What happens if someone's alarm doesn't go off and now they're going to sue because, you know, it starts opening a whole down the rabbit hole of Pandora's box or whatever. But so that's what's inside the little small kit. And last but not least, I'm going to show you guys the Lucas kit. So if you have the luxury of having one of these devices, right? They have better ones that are newer now that have lithium-ion batteries. But let's say you have the luxury of having this device. And if you got a big group of people, and the most tiring thing is going to be CPR. And they're still doing CPR on the patient as we speak. You don't wait for all of this equipment to get put in place. You see we have a little diagram there. Shows exactly where this board should be positioned. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'll put it right up on the top of the table here so we can see it. Just clicks right in. And I had to purchase this separately. It's a regulator that takes what normally would be hooked up to oxygen tanks, and it hooks them up to these compressed air SCBA tanks that are typically used in firefighting. Let's see here. I don't know.
Just take them to the fire department, take them recharged then when the tanks.
No, I took these to scuba shops to get them recharged.
How much
If
do they typically charge you for that service?
About $50. What's more expensive is this regulator. The regulator. Well, I had to buy these tanks. The tanks were about $1,000. The regulator was $500. So it adds up. All right, this just pops into here. Pressurize it.
How much do the oxygen tanks cost?
$1,000.
Or two?
Yeah, that's what they call. And this varies widely in price. Actually, they're not oxygen tanks. They're compressed air tanks. So oxygen is kind of hard to come by because if it's medical grade, you need a prescription. If it's non-medical grade, then it's going to have different ports and different regulators that aren't going to work. So the only thing that works is a medical grade oxygen port or this special regulator that works on compressed air. And I had to search and find the company that would make the regulator for me.
You had it custom made?
Actually, I didn't. They had some left over. I don't know how many they have left. So I guess my suggestion is not to go with the compressed air anymore, or if you're going to go with the compressed air, get your equipment now before it gets completely phased out, because they're going with the Lucas 3s. They're going all battery now. The Lucas 2s, I think, were a metal halide battery, and Lucas 3s are lithium-ion battery. So anyways, it's going to be a little loud. So what happens is I turn it like that. That pressurizes it. There's like a locking device. It locks it in place, right? And then I just turn the dial. There's only like 3 operations on here. And then I turn it all the way down. And that's it. It's basically perfect CPR. And the beauty of this machine is you could be going upstairs, around corners. You can have this in ice water, because the electric and mechanical components should be above the ice water here, right? Because this is just, all this down here could be in ice water, as long as you don't submerge this part.
So this is pneumatically driven?
Yes.
The only reason you need the compressed oxygen is, you don't need medical.
Compressed air.
For the patient, you need they insisted the medical grade oxygen for the compression, for the pneumatic portion, but obviously you don't need.
Yeah, I just haven't been able to find non-medical grade oxygen fittings that work.
This is for the Lucas 1, but later versions use
Electrical, yeah, a lot more efficient.
This is Lucas 1. All
Yes.
the other 2 and 3 and 4, whatever, they're all use battery.
Yes.
And all of that is just about the 15 minutes of CPR you should be doing after the death?
Yeah, you could go longer. I mean, you could go 40 minutes with this device. I'd say you get 15, 20 minutes out of each one of these. These are actually 1 hour if you're breathing, but it's about 4 times more because this is using so much more air. So that's if you have the luxury of this device. And the other beauty of this device is if you notice, it's not just pushing down. It's a suction cup. So it's actually pulling up and refilling the air. So it's actually refilling the heart. So
the later versions that are electrical based do that?
Yes.
Section part?
Yes.
And so with the
It's just a suction cup. It's not, there's not air being sucked. It's just the suction cup.
And so you have those tanks hooked up in parallel. How long?
No, I
do you run
don't.
that? Oh.
They're not in parallel. Once I run out, I have to move the regulator over to this
How
one.
many minutes does that take to move the regulator over?
I can do it in a minute.
And you can run that.
It's all I got to do is unscrew this and screw it in there.
So you can run that machine for how long, based on those two tanks the capacity?
No more than 40 minutes, probably about 37 minutes to be exact.
How long do the electrical versions you last?
That I don't know. You guys probably have 45 minutes?
On full charge.
Okay.
And you can plug it into a power outlet.
An AC?
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
You talk about the new Lucases,
The
the
2 and 3.
40 minutes max battery.
So
plus-
$15,000 will save you 40 minutes of this. So again, this is kind of cool to have this stuff, but you know what? If you're not a municipal city or fire department or ambulance service, this stuff is expensive and bulky and labor intensive. These are a lot cheaper, But are you going to get perfect compressions with that? Can you do other stuff? Can you be working on airway and medications and ice and stuff like that and making phone calls? Yeah, you can. But this will do the trick too. So don't get tunnel vision on that stuff. Just think about the down and dirty basics. The basics is what matters, and that is early notification, wearing your identification equipment, letting your family know that if they help you, they're going to get paid, and if they don't, they're not. Same thing with funeral directors and paramedics and everyone involved. So, any questions?
With the new electrical based ones, can you have them submerged in ice? Not submerge the whole thing in ice water, but can you put the body?
The bottom portion.
The bottom. So you can only have them this far up, in
Yeah.
ice water. Whereas with the pneumatic ones, like the Lucas ones, you can have them more immersed.
I believe I don't have as much experience with the new Lucas units, but I believe they're from here down. It's the same. It's the upper portion, the head. This one's pneumatic, and the other one is all battery up here. So, and even this one, you wouldn't want water getting in the pneumatic portion of it.
That highest water is going to be going down the throat.
Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Should we be doing something to the airways to make sure that no ice water or whatever gets into those tubes?
Well, now one suggestion I did have, or someone did make, and was we have suction devices, so airway suction devices, and I was not able to source that for a reasonable amount of money, but we do have shop vacs, mini shop vacs, that are designed to, clean up fluids and stuff like that. Those mini small canister shop vacs, I don't see why they couldn't work.
I mean, just kind of tape it off to the side of the face to make sure that no water gets up there.
But down to tube, the end of it.
Well, there's tube adapters for cleaning up your computers and stuff like that. You can get smaller and smaller tubes. It's just it's how far you want to go as far as ingenuity.